My name is Stephen Pettigo. I'm the CEO of OSEI Corporation. My paper is a paper that was developed out of a test that Department of Interior performed on our product, which is a first response bioremediation product for the remediation of hydrocarbons, whether they be weathered, fresh crude oil, or some type of hydrocarbon-based fuel or hydrocarbon-based material. The Department of Interior compared our product with mechanical methods and two Corexits that were used on the Deepwater Horizon spill, Corexit 9527A and Corexit 9500. What was determined is that the chemical dispersants did not do very well when the temperature started getting closer to 40 degrees F. The mechanical cleanup pretty much performed as it usually has, and as it has historically since 1989. Somewhere between 2 to 8% of the oil was removed, and then OSE2 in a 28-day time frame removed 67% of the oil from the Nantucket Sound. So this paper was developed to kind of do a comparison between kind of the old methods that have been used for remediating or cleaning up oil spills in the U.S., chemical dispersants and mechanical methods. We think that OSE2 is a way to bring oil spill response out of the 19th century and into the 21st century to be able to address 100% of the spill and mainly return a spill area to pre-spill conditions as quickly as possible without creating a large imprint or adversely affecting the environment in any way. Oil Spill Eater 2 is as I stated, is a bioremediation product, first response bioremediation product. And when you apply it to a spill, it contains biosurfactants, enzymes, and nutrients. So when you apply it to a spill, the first thing you'll see, and you would have seen on the video, is that it breaks the oil or emulsifies it or solubilizes it. Now that's similar to the way a dispersant initially reacts to an oil. However, we cause the oil to float. We were requested by EPA in 1996 to do a dispersant test, and we performed the test, and it showed that we had no effectiveness as a dispersant, and we actually caused oil to float, which we think is a plus. We don't see any benefit in sinking oil into the water column where you can harm marine species, where you deplete oxygen, and so we think causing oil to float is a good thing. By breaking down the molecular structure of the hydrocarbon, we also are breaking its adhesion properties. And one of the reasons the EPA and others some time ago developed a policy of using dispersant is to get it below the water level so that migratory birds and wildlife would not be adversely affected. Well, with OSE2, when you break the adhesion properties, you have remedied that problem as well. So while we protect the water column, we're also protecting migratory birds because the oil won't stick to them roughly after about 30 minutes after OSE2 has been applied. The other thing OSE2 does when you apply it, it rapidly grows indigenous bacteria. Now, the video you would have seen would have shown us mixing OSE2 with ocean water from the Arabian Gulf. Wherever the spill is, if it's fresh water, we'll mix it with fresh water. If it's brackish water, we'll mix it with brackish water. If it's on a fresh pond, we'll mix it with that water. If it's on the ocean, we'll mix it with ocean water. That water carries indigenous bacteria, and that is the bacteria that we're going to utilize to digest the oil to CO2 and water. So we're adding no foreign bacteria, no non-indigenous species being introduced in the ecosystem, and we think that's a plus. Typically there's three types of bioremediations: bioaugmentation, the adding of non-indigenous bacteria; biostimulation, adding some type of nutrient to increase the population; and then OSE2 is actually listed as an enzymatic additive separated from the other types of bioremediation on the EPA's National Contingency Plan list. So we're the third type of bioremediation, and also we're the type of bioremediation that is a first response bioremediation. What that means is that we can be used on a fresh spill, whether it be diesel, gasoline, jet fuel, or fresh crude oil. We can also be used on weathered oil, and weathered oil is specifically where they generally use nutrients or biostimulation or bioaugmentation bacteria. And the reason they use it on weathered oil is that a fresh spill is just too toxic for it. Now, one of the things you need to understand is like I pointed out, you want to return a spill site to pre-spill conditions as rapidly as possible with as little footprint as possible. Now, most people I ask this question to don't really understand it. Why do you remove hazardous material or oil from the environment? And you'll get answers like, it's unsightly, it's bad for the environment, you don't want it to harm birds or anything. And we like to offer up our definition. And our definition, the reason you remove hazardous material or oil from the environment is reduce the toxicity to the environment so that living organisms can survive, including single-celled organisms. Because if they can survive, then everything up the food chain will be able to survive. So if you can allow living organisms to live, then you've created a safe environment for all species. Now, how you do that is ours is different than most approaches. And like I said, so whenever we manufacture OSE2, we produce biosurfactants in our manufacturing facility. That is a third of our product. We also produce over 156 different types of enzymes. Those enzymes are critical because in not all cases will you have specific hydrocarbon degrading bacteria. And so you need to find a way to get the bacteria that you're stuck with into, or we like to say we kind of trick them into eating up broken down or detoxified hydrocarbons by offering up these protein binding sites, which are catalysts, to induce these bacteria to utilize the oil as a food source. So, and then we also have a nutrient system, which while we're breaking down the hydrocarbons and forming these protein binding sites, we rapidly colonize or proliferate the growth of indigenous bacteria that's mixed with OSE2, and it'll be occurring in the water as well. Now, in Mother Nature, when there's a spill, the first thing that happens is the bacteria that comes in contact with the spill are destroyed or killed, and they die off because it's too toxic for them to survive. The bacteria that are proximal to the spill but not directly affected by it react to the spill in several ways. The first thing they do is they emit or secrete biosurfactants, and they emit and secrete enzymes. And that is the bacteria's way of protecting itself. And what it does, that biosurfactant, when they can produce enough of it, it will attack the molecular structure of the hydrocarbons. Well, by producing enough of that in the manufacturing process, we have it in the product. So instead of waiting years and years for the secretion of enough biosurfactants to break down the toxicity of the oil, the minute you apply OSE2, we have enough biosurfactants to address the molecular structure of all the oil. And you mix our product 50 to 1, 50 parts water with 1 part OSE2, and then you apply it on a 1-to-1 basis. That 1-to-1 basis gives us enough biosurfactants, enzymes, and nutrients to address the oil on a 1-to-1 basis. So the minute you apply OSE2, you start breaking down the molecular structure and you detoxify it. And as I stated earlier, you also break down the adhesion properties. A sidebar that we learned a couple of years after we got into testing OSE2 in the early 80s is that if you have a fuel spill on concrete and you put OSE2 on it, in 3 minutes you can't light it with a road torch. So it reduces the flammability of hydrocarbons as well. And then we break down adhesion properties that won't stick to anything, and then we cause the oil to float, which we think is a better way of addressing a spill than putting it in the water column. Now, when we went out, and after we saw the Department of Interior's testing, what we did is we compared OSE2, dispersants, and mechanical methods on several bases. One basis was effectiveness. What is the potential endpoint of the product? In OSE2, you can address 100% of the spill, and the endpoint is CO2 and water. And that is substantiated with thousands and thousands of dollars of tests that we've done on crude oil, weathered crude oil, gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, and even PCBs. So we can address 100% of it and turn 100% of it to CO2 and water. It's a matter of getting OSE2 in contact with the oil. You can accomplish that, you can accomplish 100% remediation. When you look at mechanical cleanup, just as I mentioned, historically and even in the BP spill, they were able to recover or collect roughly 2 to 8%, depending on whose numbers you're looking at. It's probably more like 8% because they did have some calm days, and the calmer the water, the more they'll be able to collect. So what that means is that 92 to 98% of the oil stayed in the environment. And with dispersants, to be a dispersant on the US EPA's NCP list, to be on there, you have to show that you can sink 45% of the oil, or disperse 45% of the oil into the water column in 30 minutes. That's it. No end point. Now, a lot of people like to say that when you break the oil up with dispersants, you're making it more bioavailable. Well, the problem with that is that the products that have been used historically in the U.S. are Corexit 9527 and 9500. Both of these products have 2-butoxyethanol and DOSS in them. Those are bacterial inhibitors. So you are defeating the purpose of making it bioavailable when you have these types of chemicals involved with these products. And so what happens historically is that you use a dispersant, it sinks in the water column. In the BP spill, a lot of it ended up going to the bottom. And then in a month or so, as an extended time later, you start seeing it come ashore. So now you get to address the exact same oil a second time. So the dispersants have offered really no benefit to the spill other than they got it off the surface so that migratory birds can't be affected. And we think that's a very ineffective, non-cost effective or economical means of addressing the spill. So when you compare the efficacy of OSE2 to dispersants or mechanical cleanup, there really is no comparison. Then we looked at toxicity issues, and Oil Spill Eater 2 has over 18 toxicity tests run by the US EPA, various countries, and our average LC50 is 1900 or above. The dispersants that they used had an LC50 of somewhere between 10 and 20, very toxic. And then, of course, mechanical cleanup has no toxicity because it's a mechanical means. So OSE2 shows to be far less toxic in the marine environment. The next area we looked at in comparison was toxicity to humans, and specifically responders. And we know from the Valdez spill that roughly 90% of the responders were dead in 20 years, and there were roughly 16,000 of them. And the average age of the responder in the Valdez spill was 30 years old. And what happened is they were exposed to a product, or initially they used Corexit 9527, and then they went to Inapol, which had 2-butoxy in it as well, the same distillate that's in the Corexits. And this chemical has been shown to be carcinogenic by the state of New Jersey, and they state that there is no safe threshold exposure level for it. So when it comes to looking, when you look at the responders or the humans that could potentially come in contact with the dispersant, it's very toxic and very lethal. Now, Oil Spill Eater 2, during the 1992 Megaboard spill, my partner drank some of our product on Channel 11 News in Houston and said this is how safe our product is. And we always wash our hands with it. We always show people how safe it is. So, and then of course mechanical cleanup, there is no toxicity again because it just picks up mechanically. So toxicity wise for the responders, OSE2 is far safer, and it's proven to be for 23 years. The next issue we looked at was natural resource damage. Now with OSE2, because you've got initial impact of the spill on the water surface, so we hold it on the water surface. So we're not going to impact any additional areas, no secondaries, no water column, no seabed floor, no shoreline. So by holding it on there, we've limited the impact of the natural resource damages that are already impacted initially from the spill. Now, when you look at dispersants, and the BP spill showed this, it put it in the water column, and it had millions and millions of fish, turtles, dolphins, and even found some whales that had died because they couldn't escape the oil and the Corexit together. So that was a problem. And then the oil ended up sinking to the bottom, and it pretty much wiped out the oyster beds in Mississippi and Louisiana and the shrimping. And that was an extreme amount of natural resource damages that BP has paid extraordinary amount of money on because of the economic depression. Now, and then once again, we can look at mechanical cleanup, and you know it's going to do roughly 8%, so then 92 to 98% of the oil is going to sink to the bottom and destroy natural resources from its toxicity. Natural resource damages, there really was no comparison. Then we went and we compared the economic benefits of OSE2 to dispersants and to mechanical cleanup. Well, the mechanical cleanup and dispersants, in April of 2011, BP had a stockholders meeting, and they alerted the stockholders that they had spent $34 billion to clean up what was estimated as a $200 million spill. They set aside $41 billion for it and suspended their dividends on their stock for over a year. Now, with OSE2, and we provided all this information to BP, and BP's been really receptive to us. It's not like they weren't. They're still trying to get some permitting to use the product as well, and we're working with the EPA to do that. But what we showed them is that for every gallon you spill of oil, it takes $2 worth of OSE2 to address it. And then roughly $2, based on the large volume they had, 200 million gallons, for application cost. So it's $4 per gallon spilled. That's $800 to $1 billion to clean up what BP had spent $34 billion on. And part of that $34 billion was expenses for natural resource damages and for some of the economic depression. It wasn't all cleanup, but it ends up being in the equation when you're looking at pure economics. So what we feel like is that with OSPIL Leader 2, you have a far safer, far more effective, 100% effective cleanup possibility, and you limit natural resource damages, and therefore it makes it a much more preferable cleanup. One thing and someone was talking about the lake, and another lady was talking about marshes and estuaries. Because OSE2 causes oil to float and it breaks down the adhesion properties, even if oil goes into an estuary or mangrove, and when we've been used in estuaries and mangroves, it will break that adhesion property so it will no longer stick to the plants that are in the estuary. And we cause the oil to float. And by causing it to float, we're not depleting all the oxygen in the water column. We are utilizing some atmospheric oxygen. So we're getting more remediation while keeping it up on the surface. And it protects the estuary, and it leaves very little fingerprint in going in there and trying to clean it up, as opposed to trying to do it with some mechanical system. So, and if anyone wants to look at our information on our website, we have 223-page technical manual with numerous efficacy tests on crude oil, weathered crude oil, fuels, including PCBs. We have a number of toxicity tests, and then various other tests like dissolved oxygen test, tests for metals, chlorinated hydrocarbons, and then there's a few peripheral tests for porosity, pouring, and that kind of stuff. So that's on there, and then there's all kinds of pictures and videos as well. And I appreciate the American Academy of Sciences for having me.